Hello, everyone. Welcome to Woke-itis with Harriet Eve 9. I am your host, Harriet Eve 9. Today, I'm doing a continuation of the conversation regarding the degeneracy in hip hop music. There's a quote from Malcolm X about the media, and it goes, "The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. And that's power because they control the minds of the masses." That quote by Malcolm X is so powerful because it's true. That quote is over 50 years ago. And it was true then, and it's true now. These celebrities use the media to manipulate the audience, and people fall for it over and over and over again. Because so many people do not know how to think for themselves, blindly following any message from a celebrity who they think in high regard. The sheeple, as they're called. Sleeping people, mentally sleep. Now, Young Miami's song was released in April. 2 months later, NDIRE has something to say, and now there's all of this chatter about this song. The fake outrage, the selective outrage, the hypocrisy, the surface level thinkers, the political propaganda. All of this is mixed up into this conversation. And you would think some people by now would have caught on by now, but they haven't. Because they worship these celebrities online. But what's incredible is that they're not supporting these celebrities when it's time to purchase their music or when it's time to purchase a concert ticket. NDIRE has not released an album since 2019, and it flopped. NDIRE has not had a concert since 2014, and those sales were poor. I'm not attacking NDIRE, and I am absolutely not defending Young Miami. But I think this is a conversation that people really need to have. Stand for something, or you'll fall for anything. But keep that same energy regardless of who the something is. My issue is NDIRE singling out Young Miami because of her song Spin That and not talking about the actual root of the problem. Young Miami is a symptom of a disease that people refuse to actually have an honest conversation about. This is part 2 of my video. Let's talk.
Come through, I think I need you. I swear it's time to keep these feelings to myself. Now you're the one I'm thinking of. My higher ground, my rocket love. For gravity, I'd rather stay up here. We can get away. Palm trees, beach views every night, day. All I wanna hear is the images that we play. Sit right next to you. I'm trying not to show how I feel about you. You wish away. You didn't want you more. I just wanna get away.
According to the 2024 U.S. Census data, Black Americans make up 15% of the total U.S. population. But 25.4% of Black children are living in poverty. As opposed to Americans, white Americans make up 56% of the total US population, and 6.7% of white children are living in poverty. So you see that there is a huge number, drastically, disproportionately, Black children are living in poverty. Now, it wasn't until I got to college, my first semester, I had to take a child psychology class because it was a part of my curriculum. And when I took this child psychology class, and you learn about the growth and development and things like that of children, when the professor started speaking about poverty, when we got to the section about poverty on a child's brain, is when I was shocked. It made so many things in my childhood make sense. Uh, a real brief, I was an only child. My parents had me in day school, like what you would call nursery now. When I was in day school from, I don't know, 2 months old until it was time for me to go to elementary school. And so my parents sent me to school with my cousins because they didn't want me to be alone at school. They wanted me to be with my cousins who were my friends. So the school that I went to was the school that was where my cousins lived. They lived in the Desire Project. And I went to a school that was close to where they lived. So about 80% of the children that went to this school also lived in the project. The rest of us lived around in surrounding areas. And so I was called names like bougie and stuck up and uppity and things like that. And I never understood it. I had plenty fights in school. None of them I ever started. And I would tell my parents that these kids were just picking on me, saying that I'm uppity and all of this other stuff. And so, anyway, after so long with this, by the time I got to maybe junior high school, I was forced to take conflict resolution classes and anger management classes as if I was the problem. Anyway, it's like the children who were raised in who were living in poverty, they were given a pass and they expected me, I was supposed to be a better person, although we were the same age. Even after taking conflict resolution classes, I'm telling them that these kids are still picking on me, and I was just not one who was going to ever back down. And so, with that being said, I realized that you could not use conflict resolution with those kids with that mindset. And no matter what, there was no reasoning, there was no communication you could do, there was nothing. Because if they wanted to fight you, attack you, this is what they were going to do. Nothing was going to stop them. And it wasn't until I got to college and I took this child psychology class that I finally understood why these kids were picking on me and why I had to physically fight these people. So after I learned this new information about poverty on the child's brain, I called my mom and I said, listen, this is what I learned in school. This is what's happening in my child psychology class. And I learned this. And I want to know, why did you guys force me really, to take these conflict resolution classes? And my mom says, well, we knew you was not starting any problems. We knew you were going to fight. We didn't want you to get expelled from school. So we thought it would be nice for you to take this class because you was going to need it anyway. So I called my dad. He tells me the same thing. So now I call my school and I want to set up a meeting with the assistant principal, who was actually the principal, really, and the school counselor. So I called the assistant principal and I say to him, I say, Mr. Hoover, I would love to have a meeting with you about this new stuff that I learned in my child psychology class. And I want you to ask Miss Alice to come to this meeting as well. He's like, oh, yeah? He's like, okay, baby, let me give her a call, find out when she's free, and we can set something up. Call me back in about 20, 30 minutes. I said, okay, cool. So I calls him back, and he tells me what date and time to come, and there I go showing up. So I tell them I bring my book, I bring my notes, I bring everything to show them what I've learned. After about 10 minutes, they both looked at me and say, honey, we already know this. This is why you called this meeting. So I'm like, yeah, because I want to know why you guys forced me to go to this conflict resolution class and this anger management class. And these kids are picking on me. And so they say to me, both of them, because I used to spend a lot of time with them when I was in high school. Like I said, I had many fights. So I would be in their office. They made me, clean up their office and file paperwork and all of this other kind of stuff. Instead of suspending me, I would have in-school suspensions. So anyway, what was more sad to me, other than what I had just learned with this child psychology class, was they saying to me, we knew that you were different from those kids. Honey, you were like a fish out of water. You had no business being here anyway. I understand your parents wanted you to go to school with your cousins, but you just stuck out like a sore thumb. We knew that those kids were beyond help. We tried everything to help them, but we knew that there was no saving those girls. Half of those girls, if not 75% of them, will not live to see age 24. We knew they were going nowhere in life. Those girls, their biggest problems with their parents, their dysfunctional village, and their environment and where they were living. And as sad as it is to say, we knew that they were beyond help. And so Miss Alice says to me, she say, honey, you're fresh in your studies. And it's going to come a time when you're finished and you're done with your studies is when you're going to fully, really be able to understand just how poverty really affects children's brains and how some children really are beyond help. Some of them you will not be able to help because their brains is so damaged. And because they're dealing with family members and parents who have also lived in poverty all of their lives, they also share that same damaged brain. This is where all of this dysfunction comes from. There is a critical need for interventions to support children who are living in poverty to mitigate the adverse outcomes and to promote healthier brain development in children living in poverty. Poverty limits a child's brain development by shrinking the gray matter in regions responsible for learning and memory, and by causing structural changes in areas handling emotional regulation. This is primarily driven by chronic stress and a lack of cognitive stimulation, rather than a genetic difference at birth. Because of the developmental deficits can significantly impact a child's educational trajectory, the American Psychological Association emphasizes the importance of early intervention programs, adequate nutrition, and accessibility to high quality education. Children living in poverty often exhibit reduced gray matter in the frontal and preparatory lobes of the brain. This region is what controls memory and emotional regulation, leading to higher rates of anxiety and difficulty adapting to school environments. Most children living in poverty are suffering chronic post traumatic stress disorder because of the environment in where they're living. The high crime rates. They have a lack in comprehension. They have memory problems, problem solving skills. They're living in chronic stress and they develop anxiety and depression due to the stressors of living in poverty. They have higher incidence of mental illness. They have poor communication skills, lack of impulse control, lower performances in school. The wiring of their brains is altered because they're living in poverty. And when I learned these things, I was floored. And so it was coming to me that this is the reason why I was forced to go to anger management classes and conflict resolution classes. Even though I wasn't the problem, they were actually preparing me for how to deal with these children who were being raised in poverty. And I thought that it was a punishment. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything wrong. But they were preparing me without even telling me that they were preparing me. They knew I had to engage with these children because, after all, we were in high school. And without actually telling me why they were really sending me there, they were sending me there so that I would be able to deal with difficult people. And most people who are raised in poverty, not all, most people who are raised in poverty, they are very difficult people. They really are. And I'm thinking, wow, the frontal lobe is a critical part of the brain responsible for higher executive functions like planning, decision making, problem solving, emotional regulation, controlling your behavior, impulse control. This is why these kids were deficit in these areas. It was due to these children living in poverty, being raised in poverty, born into poverty, with parents and generations of parents, grandparents, great grandparents who all lived in poverty. And I was raised to believe that this was some sort of a generational curse. But the reality is, this was the effects of poverty on the brain, on the child's brain growing up, and how just the stressors of poverty stop their ability to be able to be critical thinkers, to be able to problem solve, to be able to control their emotions, to control their impulse. It was all starting to finally make sense to me. Yes, there are other factors, but poverty by far is the leading cause of the crime that you're seeing in these impoverished areas. These children are living in war zones. Gangs have taken over the neighborhoods. People are afraid to speak out and say who's committing crimes because they're afraid of retaliation, knowing that nobody really cares. And it just all started making sense to me. The school to prison pipeline describes how academic failure, especially in reading by fourth grade, correlates with a higher risk of incarceration. Students who struggle with reading at this critical stage are more likely to drop out of school and encounter legal problems. According to the statistics, 2/3 of children who cannot read by the fourth grade will end up in jail or on welfare. Over 70% of all inmates cannot read above the fourth grade level. 85% of juveniles in the court system are functionally low illiterate. Neuroscientists and psychologists from King's College in London did a study on 10,000 children in the United States, ages 9 and 10, which is your fourth graders. They did MRI scans of the brains, and they found that children who were living in poverty, brains vastly different from the kids who were not living in poverty. They basically confirm what previous studies have been saying over the decades. King's College in London is a research university. It was founded in 1829. And so this study that was put out recently, I'm thinking September of 2025. I will link it under this podcast. You can go and read it yourself. And basically, this study confirmed what so many were saying previously, was that these children who were being raised in poverty were basically being fed two places: your school to prison pipeline or your low income earners, your minimum wage earners. And so these children were being sacrificed so that the economy could be fed. With slave labor via the prison industrial complex and or minimum wage workers, pretty much the poor working class. They want to keep the poor poor, and they do this via the poverty system. Now, at this time, my young brain was learning about the system of poverty. Poverty is not a human failure or a failure of a certain group of people, race or ethnicity. Poverty is a human engineered system. I was introduced to Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. And upon listening to her lectures and interviews, I was introduced to Neely Fuller. Neely Fuller believed that racism was a system, not a person, not an organization, but an actual system. And when I listened to these lectures and theories and read about it, it all started to make sense to my young brain. Now, in 1975, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing was fired by Howard University, the Howard University, HBCU, because of her ISIS paper, The Cress Theory of Color Confrontation. Now, most of you who don't know who Dr. Frances is. She's had viral videos, even after death, of her being on the Phil Donahue talk show back during the day. And she spoke then that racism was actually white genetic survival. White people were not having babies as fast as black people. So in their minds, this system of racism, poverty, was to keep black people, black Americans specifically, as a permanent underclass, to have us the bottom of the caste system. And this was the driving force to keep black Americans in poverty. Here is Dr. Frances Cress Welsing in an interview with Black Journal host Tony Brown and Washington Post journalist Richard Prince. Just so we're clear, all parties are black.
Our first guest is Dr. Frances Welsing. Joining me in the questioning is Richard Prince from the Washington Post. Mr. Prince has the first question.
Yes, Dr. Welsing, it's been about a year ago since you were dismissed from Howard University. And at the time, I recall you charged that your Cress theory, which in brief holds that whites are inferior to blacks because of the lack of melanin, was responsible for that dismissal. And I'm wondering whether you still believe that and what proof you have of that.
Well, Dick, I do believe it. I was dismissed from Howard, fired from Howard in June 1975. In November 1974, while still at Howard, I heard a rumor that I was going to be blocked from promotion and tenure because of my views, not because of my academic work. And I went immediately to the Dean of the College of Medicine, Dr. Marion Mann, and I asked him, I said, Dr. Mann, I hear that I am going to be blocked from promotion and tenure because of my views. And Dr. Mann responded, to be frank with you, Dr. Welsing, this paper that you wrote, and I said, the Cress theory of color confrontation, he said yes. He went on to say that it did not make sense for me to say that white people were envious of black people because white people lack skin pigmentation. And we went on from that point. But let me make one correction. My theory does not say that whites are inferior to blacks. I don't say that. I say that whites feel that they are inferior because they cannot produce skin pigmentation and because their status as, I say, a variant of albinism is genetic recessive to blacks, and they can be genetically annihilated by non-white people, that this is what causes that sense of inadequacy, that they have built a total behavioral system that is a compensation. White supremacy is a compensation for a sense of white genetic inadequacy.
I see. One other follow-up on that, and that is, what background in genetics do you have to enable you to document that theory?
Well, I'm a medical doctor, and all medical doctors receive or take courses in genetics, and this is very, very basic genetics, and it not only is very basic genetics, this is common lay knowledge, and we hear it, the dominance, the genetic dominance of black over white is heard in the expression, one drop of black blood makes you black. In other words, if you were to relate to a white female, the product of that relationship would be an individual that is identifiable as what is called non-white. They would have something, I mean, the curliness of the hair, the darkness of the skin would make the child look more like you than like the mother.
I see. Well, Dr. Welsing, if it is true that you were dismissed from Howard because of your views on that subject, what would you say then of the implications for academic freedom at Howard University?
Well, I say that, first of all, Howard University is a black university in name only. In other words, those who fund an institution within the framework of a political system Those who fund an institution determine what is going to be done within the framework of that institution. And so although Howard University is referred to as a black university and the majority of the student body is black and the majority of the faculty is black, still it is possible, I say it is possible, that those people who control the purse strings can say, we do not like such and such an ideology or philosophy that is coming out of this center. If this continues to come out, then we will not give you funds for building and we will not give you funds to continue the functioning of your center. Now you make your choice.
Well, are you saying that this happened in your case, or was it simply the case of one dean saying this to you? I mean,
well, let's put it this way. I can only suspect that it happened if you ask me to prove it, because I will say that the same funding forces or sources, if they said, well, we like very much what Dr. Welsing is doing. First of all, no one has been able to disprove what she's saying. That we think this is very interesting. I mean, whether the theory is correct or incorrect, it's a valuable idea to discuss, or it is being discussed a lot. We're glad to have that debate going on in an academic institution. We think that that individual ought to stay there. Then that individual would be there.
What about the Board of Trustees and the president of the university? What have they said about what happened to you?
Well, the Board of Trustees and the president of the university concurred in the decision to dismiss me, despite the fact that the chairman of my department and the executive committee of my department recommended that I be promoted and given tenure. Also, the Committee on Appointments and Promotions within the College of Medicine also recommended that I be promoted and given tenure.
Philly born and raised, C. Delores Tucker, born Cynthia Delores Nottage, was a politician and a activist. C. Delores Tucker, about the last decade of her life, was fighting against gangster rap music. According to her, she wasn't necessarily against rap music. She was against gangster rap music. She was against it because of the sexually explicit lyrics. She was against it because it was degrading to women, totally misogynistic. She believed that gangster rap threatened the moral foundation of Black Americans. Now, Tupac has a song, How Do You Want It? Very popular song, where he mentions C. Delores Tucker in a very negative way. But Tupac was not the only rapper that has lyrics with C. Delores Tucker in it, and their disdain for her. Eminem, The Game, Lil Kim, Jay-Z, Lil Wayne, Snoop Dogg, and Suge Knight, the owner of Death Row Records at the time. He also said some very colorful things about this elderly woman, because she was in her 60s at the time. Now, what was interesting about C. Delores Tucker was that people found out in the Black community that she owned stock in these record labels, Sony, Time Warner, and multiple other labels. She owned stock in it. So she was making money from this rap music, while at the same time sitting in front of a camera, in front of these boards and everything else, and she was condemning it. Okay? Now, that wasn't enough with Miss Tucker and people giving her major side eye. After Tupac died, was killed, C. Delores Tucker filed a $10 million lawsuit against Tupac Shakur's estate, claiming emotional distress by his lyrics. And I just told you there were multiple people talking about this lady at the same time. The lawsuit was dismissed, but the damage was already done. See, Delores Tucker was looked at as controlled opposition, a Democratic shield, and an opportunist because she was making money from those rap artists because she owned stock. And now you have young people and the people who want to gaslight you into believing that C. Delores Tucker was some sort of a maverick. And oh, she's turning over in her grave, the different comments I'm reading on social media. And they want you to believe that this lady was somebody that she was not. And I have no disrespect for her. Rest in peace. Do your own research and you'll see. C. Delores Tucker was not who they're trying to make her out to be. Bill Cosby had one of the most popular sitcoms on TV. The Cosby Show premiered on September 20th, 1984, and it had its final run on April 30th, 1992. Now, I grew up in an all-black neighborhood, and it was mixed class. You had middle class and upper middle class in this neighborhood. All of my teachers were black. Day school, elementary school, junior high, high school, all black. And 2 HBCUs. All of the business owners, black, everybody. And so when the Cosby Show came on, there were many in the community that refused to watch it. Now, this show was very popular. In fact, it was number one for a really long time. I think the Cosby Show and the Simpsons were going neck and neck. They would be 1 and 2 depending on the week or the month. So a lot of people from my community, which was 100% black, they did not like the Cosby Show. They condemned it. They said it was unrealistic. And they say black people did not live like that. Black people were not buying $1 million paintings. Black people, children were not perfect. When Denise, Lisa Bonet got pregnant and married during the show, and they hid her pregnancy throughout, instead of letting it be something that was actually happening in the black community, they condemned it even more. Most people tuned into the Cosby Show for the singing and the dancing. They didn't actually tune in for this family, because from my community, it was always, this show is unrealistic. Black people do not live like this. And so after the show ended in 92, and just for reference, let me make sure I clarify. In 1984, when the show dropped its first episode, 63% of black children born in America was born to single mothers. Last episode of the Cosby Show in 92, 67% of black children were being born to single black mothers. This is what the data says. And 2 years after the Cosby Show aired its first episode, in 1986, CBS did a special report on the vanishing black family, where they went in and they spoke to young teenage mothers who were at the point in the 60th percentile, having babies out of wedlock. Here is a clip of the episode.
Raise your hand if you're married. None of you are married. Raise your hand if you would like to be married to your baby's father. One. The rest of you who don't plan to get married, why don't you plan to get married? I'd like to know that.
You already have your child to think about, and then a whole family to care for. You know, it's a lot of responsibility, and then you don't want the commitments.
I wouldn't want no man holding me down because I think I can make it as a single parent.
But don't you think you might need help in raising that baby from a man?
Not really. I didn't have a father. My father wasn't in the home, so, you know, it really, male figures are not substantially important in the family.
That clip was only one of the reasons for why my elders did not want us to watch The Cosby Show. Not only was it not realistic for Black Americans, it was not realistic for what was happening in Black America at the time. Black America was going through hell, absolute hell at the time. And then Bill Cosby had the audacity, about 12 years after his show ended, to publicly disrespect and attack poor Black Americans. Now, this man is a multi-millionaire, even possibly a billionaire at the time. And he is punching down on poor Black Americans who are living in poverty and in urban areas across America. He was promptly gathered. On May 17, 2004, the NAACP held their 50th year anniversary of Brown versus the Board of Education. Well, Bill Cosby did his famous pound cake speech. In this pound cake speech, he criticized urban, poor Black Americans who are living in poverty. It wasn't just talking about Black people. He had harsh criticism for uneducated, poor Black people who were living in urban areas. He criticized the name they gave their children. He criticized the violence associated with trivial matters, believing old people would get killed over a piece of pound cake. He spoke about poor parenting, absent parents. Children were raising themselves. He said Black people, poor Black people, could not blame discrimination and racism against them because their real problem was their lack of personal responsibility. And when he put this speech out, is when he lost Black Americans. Let's think about it for a minute. Here's a man that had one of the top rated shows from 84 to 92. He's a gynecologist, self-employed. His business is in his home. And his wife is a top-notch attorney. He's a partner at the firm where she works at. Their children are perfect. No teenage pregnancies. Nobody has any drug problems. They're just perfect. And it really started Black people to look at him. Now, I want to put emphasis on the year that Cosby Show started And while the elders in my all Black community refused to watch it and didn't want us to watch it because they said it was unrealistic, not just because Black people wasn't living like that, but because this was not what was happening at the times. Remember, the show started in 84. It ended in 92. What was going on during that time other than just the high rate of Black babies being born to single mothers? This was the crack epidemic. Cocaine was dropped into Black communities. Black crack addicts were criminalized and put in prison. And here Bill Cosby is, who's made all of this money. He's a multi-millionaire. All of his kids went to the best, his real children went to the best schools that money can pay for. All of his kids are college graduates. And the people who sat in front of their TVs to watch his show every week, he just told them, really, that they're beneath him. Now remember, Bill Cosby and his wife are both educators. They both have masters and PhDs in education. I'm almost certain that Dr. Bill Cosby had to take a child psychology class, especially because his PhD is in education. Now, we've already spoke about the effects, the long-lasting effects of poverty on a child's brain. Not just a Black child, on any child. Poverty absolutely affects, drastically affects a child's brain. Bill Cosby continued with his speech, his pound cake speech, that poor Black Americans were culturally irresponsible. In fact, they had a culture of irresponsibility. They blame other people for their failures and why they're in poverty. And we all know that poverty is a human engineered system. It's not a failure of an individual. This is a system that's keeping Black people in poverty. Black people, again, represent 15% of the American U.S. population, and 25% of Black children are living in poverty. This is a system to keep us in servitude. Finally, the hip hop community has been condemning Young Miami because of her song. Not necessarily because the song is degenerate, because we know that rap music has been degenerate since the 90s. They're actually condemning her because of her relationship with Diddy. She's an easy target, and it's easy for folks to pile up on her. What I noticed and what I have noticed for decades now, especially in the Black community, they would rather talk about other people than actually talk about the issues within the Black community. But I just wanted to highlight the hypocrisy of the people who is doing the criticism of Young Miami. Once again, I am not defending her. No, I'm not. But I believe there is an audience for her music. That's why the song is so hot. That's why the song just may possibly be the song of the summer. There's an audience for her. Guess who else there's an audience for? 50 Cent. He has Power Book. What is Power Book about? Urban America and all of the woes, destruction, and degeneracy inside of urban America. Urban Black America. These are hit shows. Same Black people criticizing Young Miami for Spin That. They watching Power and Power Book every week. Funny thing is, Young Miami played bit parts during the series. Nobody had any type of criticism for that. What about Tyler Perry? Tyler Perry is a billionaire, strictly off of his Medea series. Every show that Tyler Perry has, they're all about urban Black America. This is how he made his money. From the plays to the big screen. Everything is urban Black America. Stereotypes of Black men, stereotypes of Black women. And guess what? The same people criticizing Young Miami and saying we need to be doing better as a Black community because she's talking about what actually happens in Black communities. She would know her mother went to jail for doing just what she's talking about. If she's singing about her experience and making it a catchy song, why is she condemned? But Tyler Perry is not condemned. 50 Cent is not condemned. Delores Tucker is not condemned for making her money off those same rappers that she was condemning. Bill Cosby made his money because of those same Black urban people that he was condemning. At some point, if we're going to have a discussion, we are going to have to be honest. That concludes part 2 of this 3-part series. I thank you guys for watching. If you like what you hear, like the post, comment, and share if you like. And also subscribe to the channel. I will be releasing part 3 later on today. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Go, live and go.
Yeah.